Andy Johnson, Minnesota State University. This is a recording of a webinar on comprehension done February 25th, 2021. Those are the ideas that will be covered in this short webinar. First of all, one simple tip for you to try. If your child struggles with word identification, simply turn on the caption function when watching TV or video games or whatnot. The goal is to get those eyeballs across as many words as possible. And this is one simple way to begin to enhance that. Turn on the caption function. Understanding reading is first and foremost an important part of helping our students develop the ability to comprehend or create meaning. Now, the phonological processing model is an inaccurate model of reading, but one that is used most often to try to understand what reading is. It's called the simple view of reading, where reading is simply sounding out words. You see the words on the page, you sound them out. One-way flow of information from the page to the cortex. That's what reading is, right? Okay, sound out these words then. Unless you know Latin, mia no mucius ometam lobo. All right, you can sound them out, you can bark sounds out into the air, but unless you know Latin, you are not creating meaning with these words. And you're reading very laboriously, word by word, letter by letter. Your eyeballs are going like this, much the same way a struggling reader does. Expert readers, if you notice, your eyeballs will flow more like this. Struggling readers, their eyeballs go like this because they're focusing on sounding out the words. And we've told them that reading is sounding out words, so how would they know any differently? All right, what about all those very important things on the scope and sequence chart, you're asking? Yes, some think that reading is mastering all these skills. You start here, you work your way through the list, and when you get to the end, all students will be reading. Yes? No, doesn't happen that way. For example, I wrote the following note to the students in one of my classes, one of my teacher ed classes. Now I'm guessing most of you can read most, if not all, of these words. The first and the last letter are the same in each. It's the middle letters that are scrambled up. So are letters really all that important? Well, not all that important. It doesn't mean we don't teach letter-sound relationships. We don't use phonics instruction. But do they really need to know what an R-controlled vowel is, and what a diphthong is, and a digraph, and a this and a that? They need to recognize letter patterns, but mastering each one of those reading sub-skills is not necessary to create meaning with print. Reading is not sounding out word. It's creating meaning with print. It's a thinking process, not a responding process. And what is in your head transacts with what's on the page to create meaning. And I'll show you an example of that. But meaning doesn't reside on the page alone. This is called the neurocognitive model, or the psycholinguistic model of reading. Here, input data is found in the text, goes up to the thalamus, and we have 3 cueing systems. I'll look at that in just a minute. And then the information flows up to the cortex. But neuroscience has found that there's almost 10 times more information flowing from the cortex down than from the thalamus up, meaning that we're using what's in our head to perceive what's on the page and to understand what's on the page. That's why we can read about things that we already know a lot about. I can read about things related to literacy very quickly and comprehend a lot. But when I read things about financial stuff, same brain, same eyes, not so much meaning is created. What is in the head transacts with what's on the page. All right, now the simple view of reading said you just sound out words. It's just one cueing system, the phonological cueing system. This more expansive, more accurate view says there are 3 cueing systems used to recognize words as we read. The the phonological cueing systems, which is letter clues, graphophonic, the semantic cueing system, which is context clues, semantics, meaning, and then the syntactical cueing system, which is grammar and word order. All of these combined together, working together to identify words, to recognize words as we are reading. And of the three cueing systems, the phonological cueing system is the least efficient in terms of efficiency and in terms of space in short-term memory. Doesn't mean we should not teach phonics. It means we should use activities to develop all three cueing systems and not just phonics. If we're only teaching phonics, we're giving our students 1/3 of a reading education. We don't want to do that. But you're asking, don't you have to accurately identify all the words on the page in order to comprehend? Good question. Answer, well, yes, there's a minimum word accuracy threshold needed for comprehension, yes, but it's not a direct causal relationship. Meaning, word identification does not automatically mean you are going to be a better comprehension, does not lead to better comprehension, not a direct causal relationship. However, comprehension does influence your ability to recognize words as you're reading. All right, here's an interesting study I think sheds a little light on the relationship between word identification and comprehension. Little background information. The focus of this study was on expository text or informational text or textbooks. We'll call it the expository text. Starting in 4th grade, that's the main text that students encounter. They're encountering more informational text than narrative text, which are stories. Expository text, narrative text. Now, the thing about expository text, within each sentence there's greater lexical density. That means there's more information packed into each sentence. So we can't read them quite the same way as we read narrative texts. In this study, 4th grade students were asked to read expository text aloud. And then a miscue analysis was done. Now, a miscue is when what the reader says during oral reading doesn't match what's on the page. A meaningful, and there's two kinds of miscues. A meaningful miscue is when it maintains, the miscue maintains the author's meaning. For instance, you're reading along and the reader says ran instead of run. Well, the meaning is maintained. The meaning stays the same. That's called a meaningful miscue. And here are some examples of the miscues here. Lars was a big doggy. All right, that is a miscue. What the reader said didn't match what's on the page. He shot log flies from his mouth. All right, these are all miscues. What's on the page does not match what the student said. So we have a meaningful miscue and then a meaning disrupting miscue. That's when it disrupts the author's intended meaning, when the reader says ran for dog, as an example. All right, so we have that context. In this study, retellings were used to assess both comprehension and recall. They assessed the number of clauses that students were able to recall. Now, this is what they found. Those clauses with more meaningful miscues, in them, were more likely to be remembered in the retellings than clauses with 100% word recognition accuracy. Meaningful miscue, 100% word recognition accuracy? It's the ones with the meaningful miscues that were more likely to be remembered in the retellings. And they found for both comprehension and recall, accuracy in maintaining the meaning was more important than accuracy in word recognition, meaning sounding out the words just so with 100% accuracy is not really all that important. Using a meaningful miscue, the reader has to produce alternative ways of expressing the same idea while reading. That means they're reading for deep meaning, not surface level structure. Meaningful miscue, the reader is not relying simply on phonetic cues, but on semantic and syntactic clues to create meaning. All right, so what? Of course, reading is creating meaning with print. Absolutely. Instructional strategies that focus on maintaining meaning are much more important than strategies that focus on word accuracy for creating meaning. Much more important. So yes, word accuracy is important. You need a threshold of that, but focusing overly much on word accuracy takes away from creating meaning. And that's what reading is, creating meaning with print. So the big question of this webinar is, how can we improve students' ability to create meaning with print? 6 big ideas. First of all, don't overcorrect oral reading. When students are reading, they need to have the opportunity to develop their metacognitive skills. Metacognition means thinking about thinking. Students will read a sentence and they'll say, did that make sense what I just read? Do I need to go back and fix it up? You're thinking about thinking, you're thinking about your own comprehension. Does it make sense? If you jump in and correct all the time, students aren't able to develop their metacognitive skills. So you need to give them opportunities to do that. Thus said, rule of thumb, you don't ever want to frustrate students, and you get a sense of your students, your children, students in your class. You know when they're frustrated, when you need to provide a little scaffold. So you never want to frustrate and humiliate your students. In 4th grade and up, the focus more is on informational books. I've said that already. Students are beginning to read to learn instead of learning to read. You need to teach study skill strategies specifically, and that is going to be the topic of the next webinar. Study skill strategies, which are comprehension skills for textbooks, for information books, for expository texts. Those we call study skill strategies. You also need to teach students that you don't read your Harry Potter book in the same way that you read your social studies textbook. They're different. The purpose of one is to read and enjoy, that's Harry Potter. The other one is to read and understand, social studies textbook. Study skill strategies are used for textbooks, not for Harry Potter books. You can't approach them in the same way. So that is a big teaching thing that we must do starting in 4th grade. For comprehension activities, you should be using, when you're teaching comprehension or developing comprehension, use text that's at students' independent reading level or below. That's text in which they can identify 97% or more of the words on that page. We must separate the comprehension work from the word identification work. If they're focusing on word identification, they're not going to be able to focus on comprehension. And they're not the same. Struggling readers are not always struggling with comprehension. Sometimes it's just word identification. Sometimes it's fluency. It's not always the same. Struggling readers are not a monolithic entity. And the last thing, comprehension worksheets do little to help students actually become better comprehenders, become better meaning creators. Comprehension worksheets are usually more accurately referred to as remembering worksheets or go look it up in the book worksheets. They do little to enhance students' ability to create meaning with print or to comprehend. So, independent reading level or below, comprehension worksheets, not so much. In instruction, always separate comprehension work from word identification work. They are not the same. The purpose is different. All right, 3 ideas. Now, at the emergent level, pre-K and 1st grade, much of the comprehension work happens at the sentence level, sentence or paragraph level. Now, here is a post-reading activity, sentence mix-up, 2 to 4 sentences related to the story. You cut them into individual words, and the student has to rearrange them until they make sense. Simple and quick. I would have words created for each story that I was using, put it in an envelope, and then tuck them away so that you can use them again, or even review. With young children, you can go back and review these strategies using the same words and the same story a couple of times. They are looking to create meaning. Does it make sense? Metacognition on the sentence level. And I like them to be able to manipulate. That's why I like having actual word cards, so they are manipulating, multisensory, being actively engaged. Similar idea, paragraph mix-up. This is a post-reading activity. You have a paragraph or a series of sentences out of order related to the story that they just read. They are out of order. Students must manipulate them and put them in order. Now, here's this term, purposeful intent. Read for purposeful intent. That means you're reading the story or the text for a specific purpose. Now, I go through these as a pre-reading activity. Boys and girls, here are things that happened in this story, but it's out of order. We have to read to put them in order. So I'm giving students a sense of what that story is about, creating a scaffold before reading. And as they read, then they can put them in order and physically manipulate them. Adopt and adapt for all levels. Paragraph mix-up. And then a post-reading maze. This is comprehension on the sentence level again. A sentence, only one of these three words makes sense in the context of that sentence. They have to read and find the one that makes sense. Here they are using semantics or the context of the sentence to figure out which one makes sense. Post-reading maze. Simple and quick, 3 to 6 minutes at the very most as a post-reading activity. These done over time develop this ability to comprehend. You develop the ability, it's a cognitive process, and you develop the ability to use those cognitive processes. Now, most comprehension activities for students, grades, for all students, involve pre and post activities or pre, during, and post activities. All right? Now, the pre-reading activity, you want students to read with purposeful intent, as I said. All right? To get them ready to read, to look for something, to do something. So they're not just reading, they're reading for a specific purpose. These activities can be adopted for all levels, and graphic organizers, which are visual representation of ideas and things, these are great ways to organize thinking, and you'll see how these can be used. Some of these can be used with comprehension. So here are 5 other comprehension strategies. And again, use at all levels. This is pre-post confirmation. Students are given a series of declarative statements related to the story. At least one is not true. Yes, no, yes, no. You read through them as a pre-reading activity, and you tell students, one of these is not true. We have to find out which ones are true or not. Reading for purposeful intent, right there. Some teachers like to put the page number down as they encounter it in the book. Then they can actually put the page number in with it. Here's one I used with a 3rd grade student. Expository text, Abigail Adams. We read through the declarative statements. All of these were in the short piece of text that we read. As a pre-reading, I had my student make a guess. What do you think? Yes, no, yes, no. We read through there, then read through the text, came back, and then we made corrections. Adopt and adapt, but you're reading for purposeful intent. This one works very good. Pre-post confirmation. Identify story grammar. As a pre-reading activity, you introduce 3 elements of story grammar. There's characters in every story, there's a setting or settings in every story, and there are events in every story. Understanding this structure enhances your ability to comprehend. So, as a pre-reading activity, you go through a partially completed story grammar chart, telling students that then you're going to look for 2 events or 3 events. And you mix it up. Maybe sometimes you do settings and events and ask the students to look for characters. Sometimes characters and events and ask students to look for settings. Mix it up. Now here's a modified story grammar chart. All right, just the characters and events. Simple it up, simple it up. Here are 2 characters. We're going to look for 2 interesting things that happen in this story. And an even more modified story grammar chart. Characters, and read through the events, only one of them happened, or one of them didn't happen, and then they put a check mark there. And then a story grammar web. Some students prefer this more graphic layout where the title, settings, characters, events. You can partially complete this, and again, adopt and adapt. Cause-effect chart. Cause is what makes things happen. Effect is what happens. Cause-effect for effect, you read through the causes and you tell students, we are going to look to see what happened. What occurred. So you're looking for the effect, reading for purposeful intent. Bob stood up on the bus. What happened next? What happened next? Some teachers like the page number, so as you encounter them, you can either write them in, or students can dictate to you, and you could record the page number. And some teachers prefer page numbers, some teachers don't. This gets them tied directly to the text. Cause effect for cause, same thing, except this time you're looking for the cause. Cause is what makes things happen. Effect is what happens. So as you are reading for purposeful intent, this is what happened. We have to read to see what made that happen. And again, you can have the page number there. Cause effect for effect, cause effect for cause effect for cause and effect. Eventually you get to the place where you can have some of each. Adopt, adapt, more complicated, less complicated, more things, less things, depending on the age level of your students. All right, guided reading for expository text. This is expository text. As a pre-reading activity, you create a scaffold so they have a sense of what they're reading about, a structure, by reviewing the title and the main concepts or ideas within that short bit of text. All right, so this is about a turtle, and here are 3 things about the turtle that's covered in this short piece of expository text. And ideally, if you had headings and subheadings, this would impact their ability to comprehend because you can visually see the structure as well. All right, tell students that you will be looking for the important ideas related to each concept. Again, reading for purposeful intent. As it's encountered, then they record the important ideas under each concept. That's a during reading activity. Guided reading for expository text. All right, documenting growth. How shall we document growth? Well, standardized tests know that they are limited. Any standardized test happens in a single incident, all right? It's a single snapshot in time and not over time, where students usually read a paragraph and select the bubble, okay? All fine, all well and good, all right? Standardized tests are one important tool. They should not be the only tool used to document our students' ability to create meaning with print. Students' performance on these standardized tests are impacted by the vocabulary. Are you familiar with the words being used? By the content. Are you familiar with what is being described? The sentence structure, their interest, their emotional state. So all of these can impact students' performance on single-shot standardized tests related to comprehension. So we want to include more direct forms of assessment, and I'll show you that. A standardized test is an indirect form of assessment, meaning that students' reading is over here, and the assessment is indirectly measured over there. It's not authentic reading. And you want to ideally not take a single snapshot like the standardized test, but take several little snapshots over time to give you a more accurate and complete picture of that student as a meaning maker. So here are some ideas for more direct forms of documentation, their ability to create meaning with print. A completed story grammar chart, so you're testing what you're teaching. Story level, ask students to fill it in, tell you the characters, settings, and events. Or a completed story web. And again, put the grade level in. You do one of these every couple weeks, put it in a file folder, you get a good sense of their ability to create meaning with print at different grade levels. So you can say at the 3rd grade level, the student was able to successfully identify the character, settings, and events. A maze is a validated form of comprehension assessment. Here, students are asked to use both syntax and semantics, reading a larger piece of connected text versus a single paragraph. It's more authentic, more direct. As I said, it's validated, and it can be administered to groups. The ones that I've shown you and will show you are individually administered. This is a retelling chart. This is an individually administered assessment. And this is found in my book. If you want to get that, you can see these different types. Name of the student, grade, date, story, title, and reading grade level. For a expository text, you have the topic and identify the concepts that are important here and ideas that support each concept. And ask students, all right, related to growing up, what are 3 important ideas that you remembered from this? If they need to be prompted, you put it here, unprompted there. There's a total number of points, and then at the end, 90 to 100%, that would be at their independent level. So you can say at the 3rd grade level, this child is reading, their comprehension is at the independent level. They're reading independently, comprehending at the independent level at reading level or grade level 3. If that made any sense what I just said. But this is a retelling chart for nonfiction or expository text. And you see, you can check, is the student reading it silently, orally, or if you want to assess listening comprehension, you read the text to the child. Is there a little bit subjectivity in this, in how you decide which things are included here? Absolutely, but here's the thing. Don't fool yourself into thinking that standardized tests are objective. There is subjectivity in everything. They just mask the subjectivity with this myth of norm, with the myth of numbers. Everything has a bit of subjectivity to it. That's why collecting little bits of data over time will give you a more accurate picture than a single snapshot. And then the same thing with a story retelling chart. Again, title, grade level, characters, settings, and events, and you decide which events are important, unprompted and prompted, and the levels there. All right, comprehension, some ideas. Hopefully that can help you as a teacher in a classroom and as a parent at home.